China's buying behavior is once again in the spotlight, from tariff adjustments to new trade deals across South America. For more on what this could mean for U.S. exports and global price trends, we're joined today by Bertrand Oesterle, VP of Clearing and Execution Sales at StoneX. Welcome back, Bert.
Good morning.
Nice to have you back. So the saga continues. Has China actually bought any U.S. soybeans or wheat?
It's been mixed messages from China over the past week. So on the one hand, it started with we're preparing to get ready to buy US wheat. So we've had the Chinese meeting the US on various occasions, and they've taken some of the taxes away, so on agricultural products, but it still remains 13% on US soybean compared to 3% for what they import from Argentina or Brazil, for example. And then there's been some other meetings like a US-China trade show in Shanghai where COFCO was saying we're signing some paperwork to get to buy US commodities. There's been other elements such as the US reinstating the permits, the allowance of 3 US firms to be able to export to China. So all this started to feel like it was optimistic, something is happening. Now the hardcore fact is the October imports from China came in at 9.48 million tons. So it's less than the 12.87 the previous month, but it's still a record for October.
Okay.
So we don't have the details yet, but it's likely to be heavily Brazilian origin, a bit of Argentine, a bit of others, and the US probably count for very little in those 9.48 million tons. And then China started to shock the market with some other news, saying, well, we've actually granted the right to 5 Brazilian firms to sell and export DDGs out of Brazil to China. And more importantly, we had COFCO coming in saying we've signed a deal. So it's a bit of a ribbon cutting event where they signed a big deal with Brazil, some 20 million tons of soybean oil and palm oil. And that would be something worth about $10 billion. Now, what has China bought? Pre-Trump Xi meeting, they bought 180,000 tons of US soybean, and in wheat, they've bought a mere 120,000 tons.
Okay.
So the market is very dubious at present, very sarcastic, saying that China is playing games. So buying a little bit, get US prices to go up, get the rest of the origins to go down, buy the other origins, which are the cheapest. Then once everyone has realized that there's other big deals elsewhere, maybe China expects US prices to come off, and then they might commit to buy US prices. But it goes back to that sarcasm that China is just buying the cheapest.
How do you think the Trump administration is going to react? Do you think that they're going to put tariffs back on China?
That's the difficult thing to predict. I mean, it would make sense that if the Trump administration doesn't get its way, it might go back to putting tariffs on. That's still to come and to be determined.
Okay. And meanwhile, the farmers and the exporters are still waiting for China. So while they wait, what else is happening in the oilseed world that is worth taking a look at?
So if we look at the US area, it's estimated to be about 96% harvested by last Monday. It's still a private estimate figure because we don't have the USDA figures yet, but it's almost done. So that is also a concern for the US industry in the sense that there's no export to China and the crop is there, it's harvested. The only thing to look at is if there's no export to China, what is the domestic demand? And we had some EPA decision this week about some 14 small refinery exemptions, so that doesn't help either. And then when we look elsewhere, the Brazilians are something like 61% planted so far. So that's up from 47% last week. That's down from 67% last year. And that's becoming an element of focus. So Brazil started to plant extremely quickly. So it felt like China would have some early Brazilian harvest available. Now that planting is slowing down because the rains are not that present. And people are asking, is it an opportunity for China to come and buy US if they have a doubt on Brazil, or are they just going to wait and find out what the Brazilian crop is? And at the same time, the Argentine have started to plant. They're 4.4% planted so far. So there's alternatives still.
Like you said in the beginning, US soybean harvest is coming to an end this year. for this year. Is this also the case for US corn?
So corn is harvesting quite quickly as well in the US. We're getting to an end of it as well. It's estimated to be about 92% harvested so far. And so in a way, some people are saying that we're coming to the end of the harvest cycle in the US, so there should be less pressure from the harvest because soy and corn are almost completely harvested. But it is in a context where there's a big question mark on the export, so does it matter?
Right.
And when we look elsewhere, the French are 90% harvested in their maize. And if we look at South America, the first Brazilian crop is 72% planted, and the Argentine are about 36% planted so far.
So aside from the small 120,000 tons that China bought from the US, what else should we be watching for in wheat?
So in wheat, we've had an interesting week of a few tenders. So we've heard that Egypt has bought some 500,000 tons of wheat, very much Black Sea origin, we're being told. So Russian, Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Romanian, no French, no German, for example. Then we've had a tender from Algeria for 2 smaller ports. So we're being told it's up to 150,000 tons to Mostaganem and Tennes. And Tunisia has been buying some 75,000 tons of barley. So there's been some tenders, but as we have a USDA report coming, the activity has slightly slowed down. And in terms of crop progress, we've seen the US and Ukraine being about 95% planted so far. In France, it's about 79% planted for winter wheat. And the Argentine are still harvesting, and that pace of harvest is pretty good. According to the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange, it's about 11.6% harvested this week so far.
Okay, and what about the DEC March spread on Paris wheat? Is it moving the way that traders expected it to?
Not quite. It's been a bit more complex than we anticipated. So we've been speaking about DEC March on a very regular basis because we are very close now to the 17th of November, which is next Monday. It's the option expiry. So we should be in full roll mode currently.
Yeah.
So what we've noticed when looking at the OI, the complexity has been that when the funds were supposed to short cover pre-Trump Xi meeting, they've also done so in Paris, it seems.
Okay.
So it feels like some of the funds have got out of December on its own. And then over the past week, we've started to see the December OI go down, the March OI go up by about similar amounts. So it is evident that the DEC March roll is taking place.
Yeah.
But the big question is, how much have the funds rolled before? How much have they got out of flat? And how much are they still have to roll? So it hasn't been as high as people expected. If you remember a few weeks ago, people were thinking that DEC March would go to flat, +2, +5, +8, +12. What we've done is that we've gone down to -650, back up to -275. We're currently around the -350 mark. It's very uncertain as to how far up we're going to go on this roll, and people are asking questions. And then beyond the roll, people are asking questions about what the French market, especially the December contract and the March contract, are going to end up doing. And we've got some very varied opinions. Some people are starting to be a bit more bearish because they're starting to feel that farmers may get caught to their own game. We're hearing from some German participants that the estimate is that German farmers are still 60% unsold. And I've asked the same question to French participants, and they're saying it's about the same, 50 to 60% unsold. So farmers are still playing the retention game, and people are saying it may become a difficult game for farmers, for EU farmers, because if Argentina comes to calculate to North Africa, and if Russia, which still has a lot to export because the start of the season was slow, then it's going to be European farmers competing with a lot of Russian export for the second part of the season.
Right.
And so people fear that it might pressure Paris, but Paris made a high on December of 185.50. We're trading around the 189 mark currently. So some are saying that we've already had some of that correction.
Yeah.
And so maybe we're at a level which is just comfortable enough to be competitive to Morocco. And therefore we don't need to panic about Argentina just yet.
Okay.
So when I look at those two differing opinions, it feels like people tend to think that we're going to stay in a very tight range of 187 to 195. But post-roll, post-option expiry, the fear is that December could collapse in the same way as September did before and the previous month did before.
I see. And one last thing before we let you go. Are we having a WASDE report this week or not?
So the government shutdown is still in the process of being reopened. We still don't know. We're not quite sure. But the USDA has committed to give us a WASDE report on Friday.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why we've been an awful lot quieter this week. People are very cautious because they don't know how much the people who work for the USDA have been able to prepare for this report. Is it going to be a decent report? Is it going to be a report that's very questionable or not? We don't know. In terms of expectation for this report, we've had pre-report estimates, and they point to three elements mostly. So first of all, people expect the yield estimates for the US crop to go down by a touch. So in corn, instead of 186.7, it might be 184 bushel per acre. And for soybean, instead of 53.5, it might be 53.1. So that's the first thing, maybe a lower output because of lower yield estimates. But in terms of US stocks and world stocks, we have seen estimates that point to higher stocks, and that would question whether it's just about higher productions elsewhere or if it is a demand issue as well. And that demand element would be the big question. Will the USDA change anything demand-wise?
I guess we'll just have to wait until Friday. Thanks, Bert. Thank you for coming on the show with us. And thank you for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.